You're listening to The Seed, brought to you by Staley Credit Union and the Brecknitz Group of Raymond James.
Welcome to The Seed. I am Laura Richter, the production manager for Spencer Films and producer of this podcast. For this episode, I am sitting in for host Julie Staley and co host Laura Yar as we celebrate 6 months of our podcast. As many of you already know, The Seed is the companion podcast for the upcoming Spencer Films production, Fields of Gold. The film documents the life and legacy of A.E. Staley. And in this episode, Sprouting the Seed, I am going to talk a little bit about the documentary and share some of the highlights from our past podcast guests. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that past episodes are available on our YouTube channel, The Seed Podcast. You can also listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Buzzsprout. All of those links are available on our website at spencerfilmsllc.com. Written and directed by Julie Staley, Fields of Gold is a documentary in post production with distribution currently being considered. It is produced in partnership with the Decatur Herald and Review and supports the Staley Museum in Decatur, Illinois. The film looks at the life of A.E. Staley as he traveled the country to build his agribusiness empire. One seed planted in North Carolina grew to be the legacy that remains today. The film is narrated by Emmy Award winner actor Peter Coyote.
Peter Coyote. Many people have heard of him. He really is legendary in documentary filmmaking and as an actor. He has been part of of the music scene even before my time, and then in film and documentary filmmaking. He is an Emmy Award winning narrator. Does a lot of course, the Ken Burns documentaries that we see. So. He, again, you're looking for people who really have a passion for what you're doing for documentary filmmaking, and who can really share the emotion and the mindset of setting a scene. And Peter is really able to do that just simply with the tone of his voice. It's a remarkable. It was remarkable when we went through the session when we recorded with him, and how he just could really change something just so subtly. It was really, really amazing to see that happen. So we're very excited to be able to share that hopefully very soon with everyone.
I mean, I think he's just got one of those voices you just want to listen to.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? He just grabs you and takes you,
exactly a bit mesmerizing, and yeah, you can just relax and that what he's going to say
Right.
is going to be very meaningful. So we're so excited to have him included on this.
So, who is A.E. Staley? Augustus Eugene Staley was a pioneer in agribusiness. He was one of the largest processors of corn and soybeans in the United States. He actually put Decatur, Illinois on the map as the soybean capital of the world. A.E. Staley is also credited for starting the careers of Hall of Fame athletes through his semi pro Staley baseball team, as well as the Staley football team. That, with the hiring of George Halas, moved on to become the Chicago Bears. Staley's football history has been memorialized in a beautiful mural that was designed by Jerry Johnson, the director of the Decatur Arts Council.
You see a lot of what people are really looking for, and somehow you had a sense that this was something important about sharing the history of the Decatur Staley's team in a mural that you painted downtown, and you felt that this was something that needed to be done. Kind of tell me about how you went through that. There, we have a picture of it there.
Right. We started our mural project in 2013, and there were a number of submissions, and ultimately we got our first mural painted. Then we came around to this large wall that was offered to us in downtown Decatur. And our standard process for getting murals through our mural project painted is to locate a wall. The business owner offers it to us. We don't pay them; they don't pay us to paint there. And then we put out a call for artists to submit designs. And I've always wanted to paint a mural, and so I submitted a design for this wall. And you can see the initial design that I submitted was the one on the top in this picture that those who are watching can see. And it was just based on my idea of football. Decatur Staleys were on offense. The Chicago Bears were on defense. It kind of spoke to that history of starting here and going there.
We're so glad you've preserved that, Jerry, and help us all keep that pride.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and I do myself take great pride in having created the mural, and appreciate all the help that I got from all my friends and folks around the town.
Yeah, big shout out. That was a big job for everybody, to all the volunteers that helped with that.
Yeah, I had somebody who almost dropped from heat prostration that they were painting, and it was so hot. And one friend who got a sunburn on one side of her face because she was standing there all day long painting, and the sun was over there shining only on one side of her body.
And as the production manager on the documentary, I have learned just how dedicated A.E. Staley was to his business, his community, and his employees. In fact, concern for his employees led to the birth of the Staley Credit Union. 92 years later, the Staley Credit Union is now an independent financial institution that we are very proud to have as a sponsor of the Seed.
Part of the history that you have is you always talk about what if you owned your own bank, and if you join Staley Credit Union that you will, and when you're a credit union member that profits come back to you, not your investors. And when you ask how, well, you think lower interest rates on loans, higher dividends on savings, financial education, and unmatched member service. And by becoming a member, you just have to visit staleycu.com. This institution is not federally insured by Member Choice. It is proudly insured by American Share Insurance.
In addition to his family employees, Mr. Staley was also passionate about his community. He was very proud to be a 32nd degree Mason, the highest honor held, and was instrumental in the building of a new Masonic temple in Decatur in 1928.
Chad, I'm sure as you have been there for many, many years, many events, the public events and Masonic events, you have heard a lot of stories about A.E. Staley and how he has had a real involvement in the not only the organization, but in the building of the Masonic Temple.
Oh yes, I've heard several stories. Unfortunately, I can't verify anything. There's no one to ask. I've heard he besides the monetary contributions, he paid for the carpeting in the building. I've heard he's just several the light fixtures, just little odds and ends that some of the older members have heard had been passed to them. I can't unfortunately verify all of it. I take it all and I believe it. There's no reason for me not to believe. I heard he put the flagpole on he paid for the flagpole. I've heard a lot of different things. I've heard people have told me that he paid for the entire building. It's just he's the main guy that is main brother that is associated with that building because of his influence and who he was.
We do know that he paid for a large portion of it, and I believe it was about $750,000 back then was the construction cost of that. And if you calculate that out, it's about $12 million today. So that really says a lot for how important this was to him and for the community.
In addition to working closely with Julie Staley, I've had the privilege of working with some wonderful people on this podcast. Laura Yar and her staff at the Staley Museum are amazing historians. I encourage everyone who has the opportunity to visit this museum located in Decatur.
Here at the museum, we see visitors for a lot of different reasons. Reasons that I think all of these reasons are valid for coming to this museum. No, but for example, there are some people that come that are connected to the Staley story in some way. They had a family member or somebody who worked at Staley. And when they come, even though we all feel like we still have so far to go to keep growing this story here at the museum, they are so appreciative of the fact that this is happening, that the story is being preserved, and that we're growing it little by little. And they just seem and they're so happy that this home is being cared for and has a purpose here in the community. So some people come because of their connection to the Staley manufacturing, or a family connection to the Staley manufacturing. Some people come because they want to know about the Chicago Bears and the home of the Chicago Bears, and so they come just to say, kind of, I guess it's kind of a Mecca experience. We've been to Mr. Staley's home. He was the one that got the ball rolling for what would eventually become the Chicago Bears. For us, it's the Decatur Staleys, obviously. Another reason people come to the museum is because they love old homes, and they want to see this big, beautiful old home here in Decatur. They understand that it was held by one of what we refer to as Decatur's founding families, and an entrepreneur, a historical entrepreneur that has truly left his mark, not only on this community, but in so many other ways. So they come to see the home. There are a lot of reasons people come to the museum, but they always seem very grateful that we're here, that this home is being preserved, that we're growing the story. And it's always a good feeling. And they always have lots of really great questions about whatever's brought them here. They have lots of great questions and a real desire to interact with the staff here. So we're very grateful for that. It makes it all worthwhile.
Justin Kahn, with our partner Herald and Review, is a wealth of information, not only when it comes to sports, but also regarding Staley history.
One of the other very memorable and still, still legendary, still part of history pieces of the company were, of course, the athletic program, which was part of the Staley Fellowship Club. That's where they all got started. And what I find very interesting about that whole topic, Justin, is what you and I have talked about how the Herald and Review had to cover all of this, and the Staley Journal was covering, and there was so much coverage going on of sports because of the Staley Manufacturing Company.
Absolutely. I mean, there were pages and pages dedicated at times to all the different sports. I mean, people kind of, obviously want to talk about, the football team, but it was lots of, there were, softball obviously was a huge thing in Decatur for a long time. And that was, a big one. And, obviously baseball and just, it was, and he was such a huge baseball fan. And it is funny how he kind of got, football became sort of what he was known for. But yeah, I mean, really, it had to keep the sports writers busy at that time, and it was very helpful. There was, the Staleys had their own journal as well that they were able to. That definitely helped out a lot. And I remember looking for some of those where they would run every result from every game in those things. So the sports program was fantastic. It really was.
It has also been a privilege to work with Bill Dietz, the great-grandson of G.E. Chamberlain, who was Mr. Staley's right-hand man.
In 1912, he started with Staley's. He was basically a chemist, but if you read the stories about him, he's a jack of all trades. I mean, he knew everything about everything. I mean, and he had, he loved to read. He was just a walking encyclopedia, and he just and AE could count on GE on anything,
Yes, absolutely.
I was reading here a little bit ago when their plant was growing, they were using the water from the Sangamon River, and GE knew if they expanded, they would run it dry. And so that's when they started the talks about the Lake Decatur. So and AE and GE, but then GE was the one that did the presentation to the Decatur board, to try and get this passed to where they could build a lake so that Staley's could grow. And I mean, that was one of many instances that AE depended on GE. I mean, from building, new buildings there. I mean, basically AE would come to GE and say, these are my thoughts. This is what I'd like to do. And then, and GE would run off with it,
Absolutely.
and get it done,
Yeah.
and AE never had to worry about, because he knew GE get it done. I mean, that's what he was known for.
We are proud to have had the support of so many organizations throughout Central Illinois, businesses like our sponsor, the Brecknitz Group of Raymond James.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of people, generations of families that have worked at the company, so much experience that's there. And there's another company in Decatur that has more than 250 years of combined experience, the Brecknitz Group of Raymond James. You'll find the team of professionals there offering steadfast guidance for families, individuals, businesses, and institutional investors. And their powerhouse of experience is supported by the award-winning resources of Raymond James. And that's one of the largest independent financial service firms in the country. So for more information on them, you can visit thebrecknitzgroup.com. That's THE Brecknitz is BRECHNITZ group.com. Brecknitz Group of Raymond James, a financial future backed by strength and stability and so much experience.
And it was truly an honor to meet Randy Garner, the great nephew of A.E. Staley. Randy is such an inspiration, and I appreciate the stories that he shared about his family and their farm in North Carolina.
Well, growing up, I have a brother and a sister, but all of us grew up there on the farm. And as a child, not really appreciating history or any of that. As I've gotten older, I've realized a lot of what I really missed growing up and should have known more about. And I do still have a part of the farm that came from the Staleys that gave it to my mother and father, and we're there. And as I grew up there on that farm, as a young teenager and a young man on that farm, it was a lot of work. So I could imagine what it was like back in the days when A.E. Staley was there and that part of the family was coming through, how difficult it probably was. Even many years later, it was still a challenge. And growing up, it's different than it is today. You worked on the farm. You didn't get to sleep in like some of my family members are sleeping in nowadays and some other things. You got up early in the morning and you went to the barns and you took care of the animals and stuff. And back when AE was there and that part of the family, there was a dairy farm there, and it was really a large dairy farm and state of the art of that day and that time in that era. So I could imagine all of the things that went on. Now, by the time I came along, lots of things had changed at that time. There was no dairy farm there, but the farm has always continued to be farmed. Now, a lot of times it was rented out to others that farmed their crops there on the farm. But it was a place where we lived all those years. And my dad, one of his prides and joys, that farm, is he went to his grave owning that entire property that was given to him by the Staleys.
I would be amiss to not mention my coworkers who have dedicated their time not only to supporting this podcast, but to producing the documentary as well. Thank you, Dayton Emery and Andy Moore, my technical crew, and Spencer Films camera operators and editors on Fields of Gold. Thanks also to Lana Wildman, our amazing documentary researcher who has moved on to work with the Staley Museum. Lana was a past guest on the podcast, sharing all the gold nuggets that she found in her research.
Once he starts, at 14, how many people could do that and actually go and sell those things and put himself out there? But it seems like to me, once he started that, he was on the road. Even though he came back and he had the failed job in Greensboro at that hardware store, but it seems like his his brain, his mind, his thinking was on the road. He knew at that point he could do it. And so once given the chance, of course, the first thing I think we understand he sold was tobacco. I mean, he worked for Block Brothers, which sold mail pouch tobacco. I think most people have seen mail pouch ads on the sides of barns and that sort of thing. I think mail pouch still exists, as far as I know. But that was his first selling job. That was out of Wheeling, West Virginia, and he sold in to storekeepers, country storekeepers, mostly, I think, in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee. So there, of course, he starts in North Carolina.
And we again want to thank our sponsors, the Staley Credit Union and the Brecknick's Group of Raymond James, as well as our partners, the Herald and Review, First Mid Insurance Group, and McGuire, Uhas, Huffman, and Buckley. But most importantly, we thank you, our listeners, for your continued support and interest in our story. Be sure to join us again on Tuesday, September 6th, when host Julie Staley returns for our next episode of The Seed.